thank you everyone for spending the time with us today. I'm Abhay Kumar. I run the product team at Nova Labs, and I'm on the Helium core team. If you see me on Discord, I'm hashcode. I wanted to introduce this group of folks. I think I really wanted to kind of connect this to the last conversation that you just heard. Something Jonathan said around what's happening in a lot of countries around the world. I think especially in India. I think Karam, you can talk a lot about providing access to people. Moby, like you guys are building a VPN. This is very relevant to us. And Tushar, you've sort of seen this space grow, and we came to you and the rest of the Multicoin team a couple of months ago to really think about how do we enable multiple networks. On Helium, we already had an idea, or we sort of built this IoT network so far through the community. We had some ideas of what 5G could look like, but how do we enable Wi-Fi protocols, VPNs, CDNs, really just any kind of data network to sort of live in this enormous ecosystem that we think should exist, this network of networks. So maybe I wanted to get started with just really quick intros for the folks that don't know this group. We'll start with Tushar, and then Karam, and then Moby.
Sounds good. Hi everyone, my name's Tushar. Really excited to be here. I am co-founder and managing partner at a firm called Multicoin Capital, which has been involved in the Helium network since right before it launched, and also co-author of some of these HIPs that we recently passed.
Hi, I'm Karak. I'm one of the founders of Wi-Fi Dabba. Our goal is to bring 1 billion Indians online with super cheap, super fast internet. We hope to use the lessons that we learn in India to expand Wi-Fi globally and bring more data access to the Helium network.
I'm Moby. I'm the founder of Boring Protocol. We're a decentralized VPN on Solana. Currently exploring a DVPN sub-DAO under the HIP 51 umbrella with Helium. So,
awesome. So I wanted to start maybe with you, Moby. When you're thinking about VPNs, you probably have some opinions, and your community probably has some opinions of why they're important. So I want to start with maybe just why they're important.
Yeah. So traditionally, when you use a VPN, you're putting in credit card information, personal information. That's all stored on a centralized server. So moving to crypto payments with a VPN, you're reducing all that to your wallet address. There's no personal identifying information. And then as far as the routing of the information, the traffic, it's not through a centralized service. It's these individual nodes that we're distributing to our network. So everybody that's participating in this can buy one of these nodes, plug it into their Wi-Fi router at home, and they're now an exit node in the VPN, and they are incentivized to do that through the tokenization. So that's probably some of the biggest things. The fact that we are kind of committed to the open source and moving in the community governance model the same way that Helium has. I think that's really important too. And then just not having logs. Traditional VPNs have always boasted no logs, but we've found out the hard way, kind of retroactively, that that's not the case. So I think that those are all probably the most important aspect that puts a DVPN as important.
Yeah, and typically VPNs are deployed in large public clouds, right? And so how does Boring Protocol sort of differ there?
As far as
where are the exit nodes? The exit nodes are.
Yeah, so we've right now our product is live in a private beta. We last September we opened up a small offering of these nodes, and we have, I think, in 23 countries we have nodes operating right now. A little over 600 nodes that we distributed, and we're just recently opened up a second sale so that we can grow that node count and provide even greater access. The kind of chief driver of people wanting to use it right now is, believe it or not, it's not privacy, it's actually geo-hopping. People are trying to get beyond geopolitical restrictions that they face in certain regions. So it's pretty neat to, we built it for privacy, but to see how the user wants to use it is more important. I think it's really.
I mean, it really comes down to access, right? You know, when at the beginning of the current war in Ukraine, there were people in Russia that weren't able to get information, right? And they couldn't access the BBC. There's a big news article about that, and people are finding ways around to get the access. And we know that this happens in lots of countries, right? And I think the fact that you have 23 countries means you can choose where you want to be, like, and sort of access data in potentially a different way than what your sort of local governance might care about. So I think it's really important. Karam, I was just wondering if we could talk a little bit about like what you saw in Bangalore and like how you built your network, and kind of like eventually we'll talk about how this all bridges to Helium, of course.
Sure. So I think a lot of what I'm going to say mirrors a tremendous amount that Amir had touched upon earlier. Building networks is incredibly hard. Wi-Fi Dabba started about 6 years ago in about 2017. And the reason that we started our service was, while India's got about 1 billion, 1.5 billion people, there's less than 20% broadband penetration in the country, right? That is ridiculous for such a large country that's able to contribute so much to the global internet with such little access. We started by looking at, okay, the minimal infrastructure that was there, could we optimize that and provide more access? So we partnered with existing internet service providers to try to build out this massive public Wi-Fi network. In the span of a year, we deployed a couple of thousand hotspots, and we ran into a wall really quickly. It turns out that the core reason that infrastructure, especially broadband infrastructure, is hard to build is the core component is underground optical fiber. And to try to dig trenches across entire cities and build out meaningful networks costs billions of dollars, takes many years, requires political connections, and it's an incredibly hard thing to do. The second problem with that, as we worked with our partners, because we deployed thousands of hotspots and we were unable to scale beyond their infrastructure, is most of the companies and organizations that tend to build out networks sort of view the world from either a regulatory capture or a resource capture perspective. They're not really interested in expanding access, lowering costs, that sort of thing. They've got a fairly good monopoly that they're willing to grow at a tiny rate, and there's no real incentive for them to do anything about it. So we decided to take a really long and hard look at, was there anything that we could do to improve that core fiber problem, and then the layer on top, which was the Wi-Fi. Like all good things in technology that I'm sure a lot of you know, things were invented 20 years ago, but the time for their use has only started to come now. A really good example of this is machine learning and AI. A lot of these ideas are 20 years old, but either the compute or the data sets are available only now. The same principle holds good in communications technology. So lasers have been used by NASA, the military, and other organizations for a solid 20 or 30 years, but they had limited uses for them because bandwidth was low. And when we took a look at that technology, we found that upgrades and advancements in optical core technology and compression algorithms had made massive leaps over the last 2-3 decades, and you could actually use lasers to replace underground fiber. So we spent a solid year building an engineering group, building out these lasers, and for a period of 2 years, across the city of Bangalore, we installed a bunch of lasers on rooftops and telecom towers, right? Think of this as a poor man's version of Starlink. Even Starlink actually uses lasers to communicate between its satellites. They're fundamentally the same technology. So we ran this laser grid for a solid 2 years, right? And in Indian conditions, so you've got crazy summer heat. Austin is nothing compared to what we experience. We've got a ridiculous amount of monsoons. We've dealt with things like monkeys even that climb on poles and bring things down. But over a period of 2 years, we're really happy to say that we sort of managed to refine this technology and bring it to a place where it was incredibly useful. One of the things that was really interesting over that sort of 3 to 4 year period that I've compressed down so small is the demand for data in India exploded dramatically. We had a revolution in the 4G space, and data consumption started doubling year on year, and people were starting to hit their mobile data caps, and they wanted something more. And we always had this great deal of love that came from the community. You know, people would talk about, can I install your devices? Can I help you? Can I be a franchisee?
Appreciate everyone sort of, I thank you guys for fixing whatever's going on. That's awesome. But we're rolling with it because this is what we do. Tushar, I want to hear a little bit, kind of two things. The first thing, kind of like, you know, when we came to you with this sort of challenge of you know, how do we enable many networks to live in the Helium ecosystem, kind of like, you know, how you kind of, you and the Multicoin team kind of started thinking about it, and you know, we can talk about the different conversations you and I had earlier on too, and you know, we can kind of go back and forth there. And then I'd love to also hear about, like, you know, you see a lot of different networks coming to you on you know, on the venture capital side, and like, how do you kind of evaluate like these kinds of networks and like how they could fit inside of an ecosystem like this?
Yeah, for sure. So when we initially invested in Helium back in 2019, I remember thinking, this is going to grow beyond LaurelN one day. And in fact, actually, I reread the blog post that I wrote to announce our investment back then. And it's still up there. Our website is multicoin.capital. And the first line that we wrote to describe Helium was not, it's an IoT network. We wrote, this is a new business model for deploying and managing wireless networks. So we always expected that we were going to need to evolve the technology and grow beyond just a single network. Sorry, just the background noise here. So Amir came to me in December, I remember, and he was like, I really have a vision for multiple tokens living within the Helium ecosystem. I think having a single token govern all of the variables necessary for all of the different networks was really cumbersome. And we also wanted to make sure that we could parallelize the dev work that's necessary to build out all of these networks. So we started thinking, like, what do we do, right? Like, how do we change the mechanics to get this to work? So I think we published the first draft of HIP 51 in like January. And I actually went back and reread that first draft, and it was not that great. It was really complex. Right. It was basically like I sat down with a few of the people at Multicoin, especially Cheyenne, who's been very helpful on all of this. And we just threw all of the crypto economic primitives that we've seen over the past 5 years of investing at Multicoin at the wall and thought, like, what could work, right? Like, let's try everything here, and then we'll work with the community collaboratively. We'll simplify it. We'll figure out what does an actual proposal look like.
You mean bonding curves aren't like obvious to everybody?
Yes. Some of the complexity, made sense in my head.
Sure.
But once we tried to explain it to people, we were able to refine it with a lot of the feedback that the community came back with of like, what if we designed a system that you didn't need a PhD in helium to be able to like understand? So we tried to simplify it dramatically as much as we could. And we also wanted to go out of our way to seek what would those initial use cases be for the network of networks, right? We had been talking with Boris from Freedom 5 for quite a while around 5G. So I think that was announced last year at some point. Yep. But even though we'd been having those conversations, it wasn't yet clear how exactly the 5G network would work. And there were some technical specs that still need to happen. So Boris was very helpful in helping think through that. So was Karam, as well as we were thinking about Wi-Fi, and Moby as we were thinking about VPN. And I think that there's just a lot of value that's created by having a network of networks, because you need a Schelling point for these different networks. There are very strong network effects within the sub-DAOs as they're proposed, but then there's also a network effect at that higher level, because actually the network is all of you guys. It's everyone in the community. It's the people who are actually deploying the hardware. It's the people who are actually evangelizing the network and helping grow it. And so while there is a technical network effect at the sub-DAO level, right, where I can walk around and in Austin, I can hit how many LoRa hotspots? I think there's probably like 10,000 LoRa hotspots in Austin, something like that.
That's probably more like 400, but
okay, yeah, I haven't looked.
Hopefully not 10,000.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that there's another network effect at the helium level of the community that helps make it all possible.
For sure. Yeah, and I think when we started, we sort of had this like perfect idea of what a network, how to define this thing. But as you said, like the PhD in helium is there's not a lot of people who have it. That's for sure. And certainly when you have a community of hundreds of thousands on every sort of medium out there, Discord, Twitter, Reddit, wherever, like you need to make it simpler. And I think the one thing that we tried the whole way is to try to reduce the complexity of 51. I think like going to the Chapter 2 website now, like compare that against the original copy of the HIP, like it's just literally a different language, right? And I think a language that many people can understand. I want to kick it back to you, Moby, like to think about like, what does it take for, when you have you're already building a network, you already have a network, you already have a token, you already have users. What do you imagine the path forward is for a new network like that? There are others out there who are probably thinking, oh, maybe like the helium ecosystem is something I should look at. Like, what do you think about?
That's kind of the reason that we were led to heliums. We were trying to find other, infrastructure projects within the space that had, gone through this journey. Obviously, a little bit further down the road with the helium network because we're just a year old. But that led us to check out helium and kind of understand how it is that you guys have progressed. And it's been great that we've gotten a relationship with this project because as fate would have it, you guys are developing the other networks, and we happen to be one of those. So I don't really know how to answer that question other than to just go out and do it. So right,
that's the best answer, right? Like ultimately, like that's what we want. We want you guys to just go out and do it, and come to this community and say, hey, here's how you participate.
Yeah, right. A lot of trial and error, and a focus on the community and what they have to bring to the table as far as perspective goes. So,
if you were like 2 years from now, let's say, what would you like the Helium community to help you with? Like, if you see that your goals for 2 years from now.
That's something I'd have to think about. Yeah.
No worries.
It's been great. Just the short relationship that we've had, having you guys' experience, and yeah.
I mean, I personally would love to just run an end node on my hotspot. Like that's a really simple one, right? And I have decent internet at home. I'm lucky in that sense. Not everyone does.
We would like to see Helium hotspots that are technically capable with their hardware run simultaneous boring or VPN node. Offer them, this other outlet of profitability through that network structure, and I think that's kind of a more sustainable approach as opposed to us just going and building all of our own nodes. You guys already have all this hardware in the field.
There's a lot of Raspberry Pis out there.
There's a lot of Raspberry Pis out there, and the demand is certainly not slowing down, as we found with trying to source them. So, yeah, and like I say, I just think that's a more sustainable approach. If we use what's already in the field, then we're not continuing to add to that demand. That's really not necessary. So
yeah, Karam, how about you? Like, if you see like where you want to be in 2 years, how can the Helium community help?
So 2 years is one bit, but over 5 to 10 years, we really want the idea of everybody owning the core infrastructure of the internet for themselves. This is an incredibly important thing, right? I think one of the speakers earlier sort of brought up this broad idea that you do see more and more fracturing of the internet happening on nation levels, on regional levels, different levels of censorship, different levels of access. Depending on where you're born, your experience of the internet is actually really different from somebody born somewhere else. And it really feels like both the incentives, thanks to crypto, and technology have now hit this point where we've got this sweet spot where this infrastructure and the ability to coordinate the deployment of this infrastructure is in this sweet spot where over the period of the next couple of years, this is something can be done. To take something actually from Boris is, look, we might not have this utopian ideal network that is owned entirely by the people and everything works, but certainly a strong percentage of it can be done. And from the Helium community's perspective, and just if you look at the iterations and the edits of the hips and that sort of thing, being able to stand on the shoulders of giants and learn from common mistakes and get advice and that sort of thing just makes that process more efficient. And shout out to Hotspotty, for example. One of the problems is sort of coordination between decentralized deployments, right? How do you do that? So one team, one company is never going to be able to do this. You need a large group of people with incentives aligned. I'll just finish with one really short, simple way to think about this that really struck home to me over the last couple of years as we've been trying to deploy in India. It's taken India 25 years, almost $1 trillion, and about 30 companies, including government deployments, to get 20 million broadband connections and 400 million 4G subscribers in a nation of 1.5 billion people, right? If they're even going to go from like 10% to 20%, what? Do 1 billion people have to wait another 25 years, right? There's got to be a better way to do this. And this is a fantastic sort of step forward in that direction. And yeah, we're really excited to be part of this.
Tushar, how could we engage with the community to, there's these, so we passed at 51, and it was overwhelming. There's a lot of overwhelming support out there. But we have more work to do, right? We have to define what the LoRaWAN subDAO looks like. We have to define what the IoT subDAO, sorry, looks like, what the mobile subDAO looks like, and what the Wi-Fi subDAO looks like, what the boring like the VPN subDAO looks like. Like, how do we, we took, the sort of very open approach with these HIPs, where we said, here's the first version. It may not be perfect, but we're going to put it out there. How do we get the rest of the HIPs to a point to voting and potentially passing?
It's a good question. I want to comment on the process. I think building in public is really important for crypto. I think the ideas being built in public is also really important because you get a lot of eyes on it, and it helps improve the end product. It helps improve the end spec that you end up passing, and it's much better than the way that product decisions are made at Web 2 companies, I think, where it's a handful of people who have just design authority, and no one else can even see it until the product is done. But also, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough, right? Like, we need to ship, we need velocity. If we spend the entire time just debating and bike shedding, right? Like, you can end up just kind of turning into a community that just talks and not a community that builds. And I think having the velocity, having just the momentum is extremely, extremely important. I think Helium has proven out a very significant thing, which is that you can use tokens to build physical infrastructure. Helium is the first project to do that. I think Helium is the largest peer-to-peer network in the world, with 850,000 nodes. It's up there, if it's not the largest. And so that's a major proof point. But we also can't rest on our laurels and say, hey, we've done it, because we haven't. Actually, we're only on day one of the journey. There's a lot more to build. So to address your question of, what do we do next? We obviously have drafts of HIP52, which is the IoT sub-DAO specification, HIP53, which is the mobile or the carrier offload specification, and then we have HIP 64, which is Helium Wi-Fi, which is and I just want to specify that means public Wi-Fi, where you connect and then you pay to connect. There will be Wi-Fi used as part of the mobile sub-DAO as well for carrier offload. So Wi-Fi is used in both of those. And ideally, perhaps even the same hardware could simultaneously be on both, which is something I'm optimistic about. So I think we have those three out there. We want to continue to get community feedback. We've already had, some people who are here today have given great feedback, thinking through all of the details, thinking through the edge cases, pushing back on things. I really appreciate the disagreement, actually, when it's well-intentioned and well-researched. I think that's what makes it a lot better. I think, in my opinion, IoT and mobile are pretty close, but we need to give the community enough time to digest, and I think there's one more edit that we'll push out soon based on some of the feedback that we've gotten around the hotspot staking, and just trying to think through that a little bit more. Then, I think we need to work together to write new HIPs for these new sub-DAOs, like DVPN, which is a use case I'm really excited about, or DCDN is another one that we've been thinking about and are really excited about, and proposing new mechanisms for those, because those are really different networks, right? They're not the same kind of network. So you can copy paste some pieces, and people who are reading these HIPs probably notice there's some similarities there, right? Because everything is open source, you don't need to reinvent any of this stuff. But you do need to think about it all from first principles. You do want to be really thoughtful in those design decisions. You don't want to rush those things. So, my ask of the community would be, please continue to contribute in the discussions. You should be able to understand the mechanics well enough that you can explain them to someone else. If you can't, that means we have work to do to simplify it and to work on the messaging. And please help us continue to think through edge cases and weird things that can happen that we may not have thought of, because really it's a community effort to go and design this stuff and build it. So I think that would be my biggest ask.
Awesome. I guess I wanted to just close with giving you guys just a chance to sort of say something that you sort of either don't need from the community, but maybe from us on the Nova Labs team, or maybe just sort of some closing thoughts. Moby?
Cool. Well, yeah, I just wanted to express thanks for being here, for you guys that are listening and getting involved in all this, and kind of want to reiterate what Tushar said. The criticism that's well thought out and well intentioned and researched is very helpful, just to our project, but to the space as a whole. So, thank you.
Yeah, I echo the exact same thing 100%. Please give us your feedback. We need it, we want it, and we're really excited to be able to, deliver great things to you and along with the community over the next couple of months, couple of years.
I would say, in parting thoughts, I want to emphasize the importance of momentum and continuing to ship. I think that is the most important defining feature. I think the Helium community has done a fantastic job of that so far. And I'm really optimistic that this new structure with the network of networks will help accelerate that. But at the same time, I want to also recommend patience for a lot of people, because this is a big mission. This is going to take us years to really do this. The people up here, they've been working on this for years. And we're not going to go and change the backbone of the internet, tomorrow. It's going to take us some time. There's a long time of compounding and building up the network, and that we're going to make mistakes, and we will recover, and we will keep going. But we need to also remember that what we're doing is really ambitious, and so it's going to take us a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah, I think I wanted to echo that from my perspective. Like ultimately, velocity is not the same as speed, right? Velocity has a direction, and it requires everyone to sort of have a focus of where we want to go. And it really is like we want a better internet. Like as trite as that may have sounded with the last session, we actually fundamentally believe it. Like we want better access. We want to actually see that happen. And so really it's about our intention and our direction that we're going. So really wanted to thank all three of you for being here. I really appreciate it. And yeah. And thank you all for hanging out with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Great job. Thanks, Tushar. Nice job. Okay.